what's going on in the country, and he checked in like 5 minutes before I hopped in here. So he might watch it live.
That's fine. I mean, I've had Devin since I announced candidacy, and I get it.
It's a good time.
It's fine. it's funny because as we're live.
Yeah, you so welcome everybody. I'm Katie Torback, president of 5051 Vets. Rory is on with us. He is our comms director. But today we are joined by Jen Brothers, candidate for Congress in Pennsylvania District 9. Her background includes investigative experience, higher education, and entrepreneurship. She's a mother, identifies as a member of the LGBTQ community, and a sexual assault survivor. So Jen, introduce yourself.
I think you just introduced me. I'm glad you're having me here. I am, in addition to all of that, I am pretty open about the fact that I have family that has served in the military. I had two grandfathers that both served honorably in our military. One was Navy, who served in Vietnam, and then one was Army, who served in World War II, driving a tank. It was pretty cool. And they were both pretty inspirational in my life. So making sure that I'm here to support our veterans along this journey is pretty important to me. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Like we were talking backstage before we started about the War of the Grandpas. Both of my grandfathers were in World War II, and my dad was Vietnam. So, and I'm, War on Terror. So yeah, like veterans matter to our group, and we're glad that they matter to you, and we're happy that you're here. So what we do on Saturday nights on our lives is we just kind of talk to candidates who are running for Congress to see what your platform's about, ask you some specific questions, take questions from the audience, and just kind of hang out and give you a chance to talk to the veteran community, and so that we better understand you. So I did send you a list of like weird shit that we like, right, that we're into. So we'll knock those out just to make it quick, and then we're going to go into your platform. So I am also a sexual assault survivor, but in the military it's called military sexual trauma. Right now is the highest numbers we've ever seen in history. It's 6 out of 10 for women, and like 6 out of 10 for women, and then 7 out of 10 for men. So more women or more men are raped in the military today than women, but women have always burdened this on our shoulders. In 2020, following the death of Vanessa Guillen, we women veterans around the country got together and passed the Vanessa Guillen Act and the NDAA of 2021, which expanded protections for survivors in the military. They've all been rolled back this year because of Pete Hegseth, and it was deleted due to DEI. Our ask of every candidate is, if elected, will you stand with survivors and help us reintroduce the Vanessa Guillen Act to protect more generations of service members?
Honestly, yes. As a survivor myself, this comes from a place that is personal. This is a personal attack on me as much as it is on every other woman in America to remove the restrictions, and men as well. Men are also victims of rape. And in the military, I've found through speaking with service members that it is even harder to be heard, even if you come forward. And that is unacceptable. Now, I've been pretty open about my own story. I've talked about it pretty extensively, about how the man who committed the violence was standing shoulder to shoulder with me in court. And I know that happens in the military too, and it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable the amount of just pressure to not report. And once you're a reporter, especially in the military, it's harder to progress your career, or they like you to believe that. And we need to make sure that we stand with survivors of violence, regardless of what their vocation is. Just because you signed up for the military does not mean that you signed up for violence of that kind. You are there to fight for our country, not fight for your own life. And we should be there supporting you as much as we possibly can.
I am happy to hear you say that. It is an ongoing issue. Women only make up 15% of the military. Most people don't understand that. And so it is a very small number of women, fighting for this issue generally. And one of the reasons that we are fighting for a broader spectrum is something called the Ferris Doctrine. So the Ferris Doctrine is a piece of legislation that was passed in the 50s that says service members, active duty service members, and their families cannot sue the federal government for negligence. In 2020, when women veterans were pissed and we led protests all over the country after Vanessa Guillen being like, enough is enough, we were able to overturn a portion of the Ferris Doctrine. So now we can sue the VA for negligence because we were able to prove that the VA was hiring doctors that lost their medical license in one state and hiring them and moving them to a different state. So we were able to prove the VA was negligent. So what we're asking is that the other portion of the Ferris Doctrine be overturned. There was a court case that was heard by the Supreme Court here recently that kind of touched on the Ferris Doctrine. What they're trying to do is expand the Ferris Doctrine to cover contractors now. I am a legislative nerd and listened to the oral arguments in that case. And neither here nor there, but Gorsuch is like bought and paid for if you listen to the amicus brief on them. But anyways, we would like to see the Ferris Doctrine overturned, not just for sexual assault survivors. So what we're also talking about is training accidents. We lose an astronomical amount of service members to training accidents. And I got out as an NCO. I know that I always had to do risk assessments. And sometimes these risk assessments are ignored, and then people get severely injured or killed. Then the government covers up what actually happened because we pay the life insurance money and we say, but you got the money. Yeah, and so would you support any piece of legislation that tries to overturn the Ferris Doctrine? Because in the corporate world, corporations are held negligent all the time, right? If sexual harassment, sexual assault, accidental death, like gross negligence, you can sue, but you can't sue the federal government. So would you support that?
Yes, I do support that. And it goes back to you signed up to serve your country. You didn't sign up to get hurt in a preventable accident. When you're talking about litigation, you're talking about things that are preventable. As an investigator, I did have a pretty extensive caseload where I was looking at, say, workman's comp. That's what a lot of investigators go and they get started in, as workman's comp claims. And those are preventative accidents that may lead to litigation. Well, I don't see why the employer of that matters. There's a violation. It's preventable. We can fix it. We should mitigate that. We should be able to, have suits against it. And I mean, honestly, we've carved out a couple of times in history. You were talking about the victims of rape survivorship, but we've also carved out for example, some of the toxic chemicals that they used. There were a couple of instances where the Supreme Court said, oh, well, I guess maybe you can do that. You can sue for that. But it's very unique circumstances where they are willing to carve that out, if we can fix the legislation and make that broader, we probably won't have as many issues because we'll be able to be preventative in our care. I like preventative measures rather than, you know, oh crap, band-aids. Let's go ahead and put some preventative measures in place so we don't have to get to the litigation. You know, going back to survivorship, if we can prevent someone from having rape trauma, then that makes the world a little bit better. That gives somebody a life that is unchanged. And even when we're going into, say, you lose a limb, I'm also a nerd. That's why I kind of smiled when you talked about being a nerd. But have you ever read the dismemberment policies? The dismemberment policies, they give you a dollar amount for each one of your digits.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's crazy. This is worth more than anything, okay?
Oh. Fun story, because Rory heard this the other day. I have a knee replacement, and it was done on active duty because I was injured, and so I knew the dismemberment policy, and I said to them, "You should cut it off at the knee, and then give me like one of those tink legs," and it made complete sense in my mind because like the number was like 50 grand for half your leg, and you get a better leg. And so like they sent me to mental health because you shouldn't want to cut off your leg. So but yeah, like it's very interesting having a health insurance policy that like pays you for different body parts. So yeah, interesting.
And very clearly outlined. It's I think I was like 18 and I read my first dismemberment policy. It was at my first job and I was like, what do you mean? They list everything.
I thought I was the only one that knew that. That's so cool. Yeah, A+ for being a nerd. Yeah. So along that like same line, right, where we're like suing the government for negligence, let's talk about fixing Washington, because you want to fix Washington. I want to fix Washington. I think everybody wants to fix Washington because it is a shit show on both sides of the aisle. So let me ask you just this, like, what does working across the aisle look like to you at this point, given like where we are in history, the rhetoric, like what does that look like to you?
I mean, honestly, I've worked in careers my whole life. Well, maybe not my whole life, but for most of my adult life, I've worked in careers, in positions that were mostly Republican positions, and I'm coming in as a Democrat. I already work with Republicans on the day to day. It is more so making sure that we are people focused and not stuffing money in our pockets. So if we can clean up Washington, really, to me, that means taking away stock trading. It means doing term limits. It means making sure that people aren't lifelong career politicians. You know, I'm not a career politician and I don't want to be. I complain probably too often that I started this journey because I just got so tired of all of these people coming in and they're talking about what they're doing for themselves. They're coming into this sort of role that is a public servant without the public in mind. And to me, that's crazy. And I was comfortable in my old life as an investigator. I was winning awards, doing all the things. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to step up that doesn't want to just shove dollar bills in their pocket. And for me, that's kind of what that looks like, is going in, making sure that I can push for legislation that stops the corruption, because I've stopped corruption and sought justice my entire life. And that's kind of the driving force behind everything. And as long as we keep that in mind, we're not doing it for the wrong reasons.
I think there's a lot of corruption on both sides, right?
Oh,
And when we talk about like cleaning up Congress, right? Like for me, you said banning stock trading. That's number one. You're not there to make money. I hate I always out myself. I'm a lifelong Republican. I have not voted Republican in quite a few years now. Um but you shouldn't be there to make money. Like that's not your job. And there's people on my side of the aisle that are like, yeah, but they're, like let them make a little money. Like, no, you shouldn't. Um, because like let's be honest, like I was looking at figures today. The Trump family in like 10 months time has made something like $3 billion in deals while in office. And that's like blatant corruption, right? Like that's like right in your face corruption. So I think banning stock trading is a must, not only for the member, but for their like spouse. And you should divest from everything. And I don't mean putting it in a trust. I mean selling everything and
mhm.
not owning it at all. Because if you're making policy that's going to affect the market, it doesn't matter whether it's in a blind trust or not, it's still going to affect it, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's not your spouse, it's your cousin. Like it's still the same bullshit corruption on both sides of the aisle. Um, and so I do
So
agree with you.
Dan Mueser, the guy that I'm running against, he originally had a 6% return on his investments before entering Congress. 6%. It's normal. That's a normal investment percentage. He's been for 6 years. He has doubled his net worth. He went from 33 million to over 67 million dollars with 500% in his returns. That screams corruption.
Yeah,
It's nutty.
that's crazy.
So
Yeah,
out. We
I
replaced
like
them.
it irks my soul on both sides. Everybody does it. Everybody makes money. I think AOC, she like I like her a lot. Like I don't like her policies. I think they're kind of crazy. But I do like her anti-corruption. She's very vocal about it and I'm here for it. So yeah, we're here for the full ban. Something that you said is interesting is term limits, right? I always tell people this because a lot of people don't know this about term limits. It can't be legislated. There's a Supreme Court case already saying that term limits are unconstitutional because it's the will of the people. Here's the thing, though, what we advocate for, our group, is instituting it into the bylaws of the RNC and the DNC and whatever large political party that might come about. Is that if it's instituted in the bylaws, then like you have to hold to it, but you can't legislate it. We are here for term limits. We came up with like magic numbers in a smoke pit one night of like what we think. But I don't think you should be a lifelong politician either. I don't want somebody that's 70, 80 years old making legislation for things that they're quite frankly not going to have to live through. And that's shitty.
And here's the thing, the reason why we have term limits for the president is because Washington decided that he was going to step down. So it starts with the politicians, the people that you elect. They're going to impose or not impose term limits in a way. It may not have to be legislated, right? If we get the right people in place, they're going to step down because they know their time is up.
You could do like we talked about this too, because I forgot to send you this. But you could do a constitutional amendment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're to the point, and we've talked about it in our group quite a few times. A convention of states can be called. And if people in Washington aren't going to do their job, then it's our job as citizens to get our state governments to call for a convention of states. We've talked about like radically amending the Constitution to make it more just for everybody. Not everybody's a huge fan because if you use that, it can be done for good and for bad. And we understand that. But term limits is an interesting constitutional amendment that should be discussed because then it's like you don't have to go against the Supreme Court because Supreme Court decides on constitutionality. And so if it's in the Constitution, fuck your Supreme Court case. Now it's an amendment. So that's one of our things. One thing is getting corporate money out of politics, right? We are huge partners with Money Out of Politics. They're a great organization. I suggest that you look into them. You take their pledge.
I signed their pledge.
Oh, bet. Yes.
I did.
Yes. One of the things we do want to see legislation done is to overturn Citizens United. The influx of money into politics has made it the voice of the common person diluted to the point that it really doesn't matter. Especially when you have human beings on both sides accepting hundreds of millions of dollars of PAC funding. One of the things we do like to ask is, will you, your thoughts on AIPAC, and should they be registered as a foreign lobbying firm?
AIPAC has already reached out to me and I told them where they could go. So we will not be taking AIPAC money or JPAC money. I do not feel like AIPAC has the best interest of American citizens in mind. And I do feel like the people that have taken that on both sides of the aisle, because they approach everybody. They have blank checks and they just want to write them. And I think the people that have taken their money have not really kept the things in mind that we need them to keep in mind, especially when it comes to the goal of AIPAC. And I don't support it. I don't support their mission at all. And I really think that we need to make sure that we're putting people first, and that includes people, the average citizen in other countries. And my feelings on war may get me in trouble in this room. It may not, but honestly, I watched my grandfather. So my grandfather, who had Alzheimer's, he was a World War II vet, and I learned about the war through his eyes. As he relived moments of war, I lived the moments of war with him. And the innocent civilians are the ones that are impacted, and that includes some of our soldiers, most of our soldiers. There are citizens and we need to protect them, so we need to try as hard as possible to prevent acts of war. And that would be one of my goals. I like to say that I am, always people first. And most of my policies, you can pretty much guess what I'm going to say about most things when you think about the human aspect of it. And that's where I'm at with that. So the casualty of war is always the people at the bottom, and not the people who have bukus of money they don't usually serve. And that's not fair. And they just need to learn how to talk things out sometimes.
Okay, you're not going to get in trouble for talking about no more wars with us. Actually, we'll transition to stuff like that foreign policy and what's going on currently with this administration. So we as veterans, we don't want another war, right? Like anywhere in the world. Not in Venezuela, not in Nigeria that we just bombed. We don't want to see another generation. I'm a 5th generation veteran. Every generation has served in a war. And that's weird. We have been at war for 232 years. as a country. We are a war-loving nation. The fact is, though, is that war is costly. I'm a fiscal conservative, and war is costly. Not only that, our VA, right? Like people talk shit about the VA. I don't care, right? Like the VA does what the VA can do with the money allocated to the VA. And we'll get into that because like that matters. But I have children and I don't want to see my girls go to war. Like I had my girls leave. I'm 38. But I have friends that have kids that are of military age, and I don't want to see their kids go to war. I don't want to see anybody's kids go to war. A, because it's pretty useless tactic. And B, we don't have the healthcare we need to continually take care of more veterans. We just spent 20 plus years at war. We have more veterans now than we ever have. Our benefits are on the chopping block. We're not even fully funding the PACT Act. And there's going to be an influx. And one of the reasons we're not funding the PACT Act is because if we do, there's going to be an influx of more veterans that need care. And so, yeah, we're not here for war. What I do want to ask is we are a member of the impeachment coalition. So we have done the national protests. We were there in DC on 11/22. I was on stage with one of our coffin flags. We think, actually, we don't think, we know. We know that Pete Hegseth needs to be impeached and removed from office. The reason being is you can only impeach people for certain crimes. It's in the Constitution. And high crimes is one of them. And so we are committing war crimes according to the Geneva Convention, according to the laws of war, according to multiple treaties that we have made with other countries. Would you, if elected, and God forbid him still be there, support the impeachment of Pete Hegseth?
Yes, absolutely. No question.
We also know for a fact that Tom Homan should be impeached because it is a proven fact that he accepted $50,000 as a bribe. And that is within the constitutional confines of impeachment as well as bribery. So would you support impeaching him?
Yes.
Our last one that we absolutely should impeach is Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem, besides me generally thinking she's a horrible human being, is committing crimes against humanity. So I live in Florida. Alligator Alcatraz is one issue, but that's a state of Florida specific issue because it was run by Ron DeSantis. So I will be taking that on. But Crome Detention Facility is run by DHS. And there was a report that came out that was done by Amnesty International. We did a video on it. I read it. And Crome Detention Facility is breaking humanitarian law. The Nelson Mandela rules for imprisonment, the Geneva Conventions, which it's technically not at war, but there are certain conventions, prisoner conventions, that are being broken by Kristi Noem. And so we would like to know if you would impeach her as well.
Yes.
Cool. A+. So moving on to yeah, Israel and Palestine. So we support genocide. We generally don't think we should support genocide as a country. We are funding genocide at a rate I never thought possible. Like you said, your grandfather fought in World War II. My grandfather liberated Dachau. And so I'm sure we all said never again. This is never again. And it's not the only genocide going on in the world that we are funding. We're funding the Sudanese genocide as well. So would you stop all military funding to Israel and to Sudan and to anywhere in the world that supports genocide with our tax dollars?
I absolutely stop that. I do not believe in funding bombs when we can't feed our people. And I know it's not a take this from this column and give it to this column, but it kind of is. We do not need to be funding war that is attacking innocent civilians when the people at the top really need to just talk to one another. And I like to say it's grown men need to learn how to talk to other grown men, because it's usually two dudes that can't get along, and then they go and they send out innocent civilians to go fight a war for them that eventually is going to end in a boardroom anyway. Go ahead and end it in the boardroom. Grow a pair, fix it.
I think that's part of the problem with Congress right now overall, right? Is identity politics. Is like I said, I grew up a conservative Catholic. Interestingly, my mom went to Penn State. But now, like all the friends I grew up with that are like super deep into MAGA, like I can't even have policy discussions. And I think one of my sticking points with most people that run for office, right, is like you can have all these great things, but what it is policy, right? Policy matters because legislation is what matters. Like my congressman, he is not controversial. He is never in the news, but he also doesn't legislate. And he doesn't earmark anything for Jacksonville. He has put forth no pieces of legislation in his tenure in Congress. And I am a firm believer, like you said, of being a public servant. And being a public servant means that you are going to put forth legislation that is going to benefit everybody, not just one person, not just one class of individual. And that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask you is, as a legislator, how would you ensure like transparency? Because we're talking about accountability of government, transparency on bills that you're voting on, where your constituents understand who's benefiting from that piece of legislation. Because I don't think that there's enough of the populace that understands how policy works, right? Or how it's written, and words matter, right? Like I'm a policy nerd. The way it's written matters. And people vote for shit legislation all the time, like on a local and state level, because they don't understand how it's going to affect them. And so I think it's a responsibility of the legislator that gets elected to explain that to their constituents of like, this is the bill that I will be voting on. This is what's going to happen with said bill, so that they understand what's happening.
I mean, part of being a legislator is education. It's a component that we're currently missing in my district, is the education component, because if you ask a question to the guy that's currently in office, it's not always a nice response. But, there's a reason why I'm running today. So,
Nice.
and I mean, we have to be able to be open and honest about what we're doing. And part of that too is single piece legislation. As right now, I know it's pretty controversial across the board. I hear about it all the time when I go and knock on doors, they always say, stop hiding stuff in these bills. Well, I don't want to hide anything. If you can't figure out the way that I'm going to vote on something, ask me, I'm going to tell you, because I work for you. And that's, honestly, it's been kind of something that I've been educating the public on too, is the fact that even though you can't vote for me, the things that I do in Congress impact you. So you're still allowed to talk to me too. And it doesn't matter if you can vote for me or not. Call me up and say, hey, Jen, how do you feel about this? I'm probably going to have an answer, or I'm going to have to research it and get back to you with an answer. I'm not always shooting from the hip, but I like to do a little bit of research, but that's part of being a nerd. But you should know where your legislator's coming from, and they shouldn't be trying to hide anything that they're doing. And when they tuck these little caveats into a bill, it kind of feels like they're trying to hide something. And yeah, sometimes we make bills and it only impacts a small percentage of the population. But when we do that, it should be to make that population kind of on an even playing field. It's equity, not you have to make sure that you give the box to the short person so they can see over the fence. As the short person that needs to see over the fence.
Yeah, no, I get it. I always tell people about the transgender in sports bill, right? Most people don't understand that piece of legislation affected nine individuals, and we have much bigger problems. We have children that can't eat every night. We have elderly that can't pay property taxes and are losing their homes. We have an affordability crisis. We have so many more issues that need to be addressed, and legislation that affects 9 individuals that is already regulated by 2 separate entities is dumb. And as a nerd, you'll understand where I come from on policy, right? Whenever I ask people about policy questions and their frame of reference for policy, I talk to both sides of the aisle about policy often, because I think as a country, we look at policy wrong. And we look at it in a way that doesn't benefit most people, A. And both sides of the aisle write policy to screw the other person for 2 to 4 years to get more votes. Whereas if you look at other people around the world, and people always think I'm talking about China. China's one of them. But China, Russia, Japan, Denmark, like dynasties, they think in dynastic view, right? Like, how are we going to make our nation better for 100 to 250 years, not 2 to 4 year increments just to get votes, right? And that's what's important. Is it doesn't matter, like, the polarization of politics today is so strange, because when you talk to like people like me who are lifelong Republicans, I'm not MAGA, but like lifelong Republicans, and then like
There's
lifelong, yeah, like Democrats, like we want the same things, right? We just don't agree on who's going to pay for it. Like, that's really what it comes down to.
sometimes we do agree on who's going to pay for it too, and that's the crazy thing, is we have so much commonality across the aisle.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. The number of times that I get called a Republican when I've been a registered Democrat my whole life. But it's a lot, especially when I'm having these bipartisan conversations, because we really do agree on a whole lot, especially as a rural Democrat. I live in the woods. I've always lived in the woods. I think our farmers should be protected. I think our vets should be protected. I think that, we should be able to increase our price at market. And I can have these conversations pretty articulately because I've lived it, and because also it should be something that we all are fighting towards. Let's figure out a plan to get there. So when we write policy too, we need to make sure that not only do we have the idea there, but we also have the mechanisms in place. There's a law going back to, being a rape survivor. There's a law called VAWA, and VAWA does not have an enforcement mechanism. And it is one of those laws that has made me viscerally angry because they took the time to write it, they took the time to pass it, but then there's no enforcement mechanism there, and the enforcement's left up to the states. Well, every single state does it differently, and women are not protected across the nation because of it. And it's just one of those things that needs fixed, and I guess I'm gonna have to fix it. And so when we are writing these pieces of policy that are impactful to multitudes of people across the US, we need to make sure that there's a way to pay for it, a mechanism to enforce it, and that the idea there actually makes sense.
Yeah. And I always think it's more impactful when it's a bipartisan effort, right? And just talking to people right now across the aisle is just so weird, right? And it's like, like I was telling a short story. I was telling you beforehand, I got doxxed by Libs of TikTok. I had a bunch of death threats, which I was like, please, like show up to my house. And then one of the guys like apologized. And one of the things that I think is so crazy is when we got to talking about policy, to be like, hey, let's talk about like everyday life. What does your life look like? Can you afford groceries? Like, did your kids have good education? Like let's talk about life in general and not do this. Bipartisan support for Ukraine. So, all right, let me ask you my weird Ukraine question that everybody hates. And it's a Katie opinion. It is not a 50-51 vets opinion. Nobody else likes my opinion on this. I'll be quite frank. So we talk about Israel committing genocide and no more wars, right? I am a believer in the America First agenda, right? Like not the like fascist part of it, but like we need to reinvest money in our people for better education, better opportunities, all of that, right? And one of the ways we can do it is stopping wars and reinvesting billions of dollars into our own economy. I think that if we are not going to send money to Israel, we also need to not send money to Ukraine. And the reason being, and nobody agrees with me, they're not a NATO ally. And I don't think that we should be sending money to anybody for their sons or daughters to be cannon fodder in someone else's war. I don't think that continuing that, and you have seen babushkas with Molotovs taking on the Russians, right? Like you just see like these little babushka ladies like with Molotovs taking on tanks, continuing to fund billions and billions of dollars when it's not particularly our responsibility. We are not the world police. We should not fund other people's wars, especially if it's proven that hold their own, right? Like, so
I mean,
what is your thoughts on the Ukrainian war? Would you continue to fund Vladimir Zelensky and the Ukrainian effort?
so I'm gonna start and I'm gonna be really nerdy and it's gonna я не по-русски, я американка. Я не по Ukraine, я американка. I am an American. And I think that we should put America first. But there's gonna be a but. We need to make sure that we fund some goodwill efforts because that reduces our chances of initiating and getting involved in war efforts. So you look at the Jimmy Carter approach, right? Jimmy Carter got a lot of hell for, I'm going to get in trouble for cursing. Jimmy Carter got in a lot of hell because instead of fighting against giving away a piece of the canal, he gave it away as an act of good faith in order to stop us from entering into war. And I really feel like in specific instances, continuing goodwill aid is more beneficial than sending money for bombs. I do think we should put people first, period. So putting our people first, yes. Making sure that we have the things we need, that we have food, shelter, education for everyone that lives here. And then what we have left over, maybe we buy some goodwill
Question.
for our people.
Question for you with that, Jen. Wouldn't that just fall, that goodwill aid fall under US aid?
AID, I was going to bring that up, soft power.
Sorry, that's where I was going with it. Sorry for the second.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I love these questions, but yes, that is part of our US aid. That is what that's there for. It's to buy goodwill. Now, did I say take our entire military budget and throw that into good? No. We have stuff at home that we need fixed. You know, it's like if you own your own house and your hot water heater's broken, your electrical doesn't work, your plumbing is shot. Well, you got to fix your house before you can go and fix your neighbor's house. And let's fix our house.
Like so many, I listen to a lot of podcasts because I'm a nerd, and so many people who like run for office, right? They're like, let's take care of Americans. Let's, like, every politician, both sides of the aisle, they're like, oh, let's be America first, and then they get in office and there's no legislation to fix healthcare, to fix immigration, to fix tax reform, to fix these issues. It's all like culture war bullshit for 2 years, and then we have another election. And I look at the Congress website all the time for bills that are introduced that are veteran related or interest me. And there's just not a lot of good pieces of legislation that are going to fix what's going on in the country, what's going on with healthcare, what's going on with affordability, what's going on with rural farmers, right? And so let's get into your platform, because you are from a very rural place. I had asked my mom today, we went to lunch, and like I said, she went to Penn State. Both of my parents are from New Jersey originally. I'm a Floridian. And so I asked my mama if she knew where your district was. And she said yes, and then had to explain to me where it was. And yeah, you're in a rural place. So you've committed to protecting farmer assistance grants, right, from political shifts. And we have seen what that looks like here recently, especially with the tariffs, with the soy beans, and the China issue, and all of that. One of my uncles lives in Iowa, on a farm. He's an FBI agent. He's not a farmer, but he lives on a farm. What safeguards would you support to ensure what's happening today to our farmers will not continue to happen as like political talking points in the future?
I also grew up on a farm, right? I grew up on a dairy farm in the middle of nowhere. And I actually grew up between Ohio and Kentucky in farmland. And I know what it's like to have the government come in and say, you have to stop doing what you're doing. We don't want you to do that anymore. Here's a check. We had tobacco at one point, so we had tobacco subsidy. And the tobacco subsidy was a check to stop doing what you're doing, which takes out the component of the knowledge base to pass on to future generations on how to even have that as a crop. It's just, our country has treated farmers in rural America as a talking point commodity for my entire life, for your entire life, because we're around the same age, we have been a talking point commodity without real representation. And people will hear this from me a lot, but only 2% of all members of Congress have ever came from the American working class. Only 2% of all members of Congress know what it's like to get up in the morning, go to a job, and come home and try to figure out how to divvy that money out to pay all your bills in the same month. That is not okay. Because we don't have real representation in America, we do not have representation that looks like us. We are continually having these fights and having the plight of the American working class, which includes our farmers, which includes just average, everyday American workers, our labor union brothers and sisters, all of these people. We have become a talking point because the affluent controls our government. So one, we need a shift in that. And the more that I can get people to understand that only 2% of all members come from the American working class, the better I feel like our country is going to get, because at least we have the awareness that we are not the class that's in power. Now, specifically for farmers, to make sure that we have what we need to make sure that we have legislation in place that allows for the farmer to take ownership of their product. I don't know how much you know about farming, but I know too much. And I know that buying seeds, you have to buy your seeds from the seed store. If you get caught using the seeds that you create from your own product, you can get fined and in trouble, and you could lose your farm. That is nutty bananas. I know that for farmers to add value to their product, say for milking, for example, because, you know, I know that it's actually one of our largest agricultural products in our district. It's funny. I was waiting for you when you were explaining what your mom told you. I was waiting for her to say that you turn left at the cow and you just keep going, because that's what you have to do to come to my district. And so we have a bunch of milkers. We have a bunch of people who have dairy farms here. And one, our dairy farmers are all losing money right now. It's about, I was talking to one farmer. I don't know exactly how true this is, so don't put me into textbook or anything, but he was saying that for every single cow he has, it's $36 per head that he loses every year right now, because the price at market for dairy has not gone up. It's not met the same standards as our economy with our inflation. So he is not getting enough money to continue milking, but he still does it anyway, because that is his family's legacy. We have people who are getting second and third jobs just to support their family farms, and that's not okay. We need to make sure that we put legislation in place where the profit margins are higher for the producers of the product than, say, for the people who are making billions of dollars, thank you Walmart, billions of dollars off of our labor. So we need to make sure that we are doing this, but we are making sure, sorry, I saw a comment go across. I have ADHD. So we need to make sure that they're able to get enough money at market. Also, we need to make sure that they're able to add value to their product. There are a lot of pieces in place that prevent them from being able to add value, whether it be not being able to afford the equipment to do so, or maybe there is legislation in place for certain products to add value, say for those milkers, in order for them to make their own cheese or whatever in-house. Sometimes there are things in place where they cannot do that. Well, we need to open up those avenues for them, make sure that they have the equipment that they need in order to do it. And from there, let the farmers take it over, because they're going to add value. They're going to make money. They're going to continue this anyway, because it's been in their families for 200 plus years. Okay, there's no farmer. Well, there are new farmers, and that's a side quest. But our legacy farmers, they're doing it because their family has always done it. And that is often where you're going to get the most value, the most knowledge. And if we could just package all of that knowledge up and pass it on to the next generation, look at how much further along America would be anyway. So I am very much a proponent of 4-H. I volunteer with 4-H every single year. I judge our 4-H competition at the local county fair. I do the judging of their packets. So usually they have a project and I have to go through it and make sure that they've hit all their marks and that their project makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. It's cute. But, making sure our kids have access to these activities, because these are things you don't learn in school. These are things you learn from the people that do it. So the home that I'm sitting in right now, when I bought this house, it was full of bees. It's the craziest story, but there was an entire wall where the direct sun comes in from, when it rises, when the sun comes in, it made one side of the wall really warm, and bees really like to nest here. So I had to dig out an entire wall of my 2-story house, and I had to extract the bees. So the first time I paid a guy, he came, he took the bees, he said bye. I had a lot of repairs to do. The second time he came and I said, listen, you got to teach me how to take these bees out because they're going to come back. So he taught me how to take the bees out, and I learned how to beekeep begrudgingly because they were attracted to my home. But I got value from him. I got more value the second time he came than the first time he came, because I learned the skill. I took them out the third time they came in, and I finally figured out a way to keep them out. But then I had bees and I didn't know what to do with them. So I became a beekeeper, and I have honey now and I make mead. Did I mention I have ADHD?
I love it.
I love mead, so I can back that.
Yeah, no, so I'm a part of ACE Mentoring. I don't know if they have it where you are. I work in the construction industry, and I have for years. And so the ACE program is architecture, construction, and engineering. And so I mentor high school students that want to go into it. So they present a project too at the end of the year, and it's always fun to be like, yeah, that you can't build that. That's not constructible. But I do think farming is an industry where knowledge is passed generation to generation, and so is construction. Because most people, the next question I was going to ask you was about infrastructure in rural areas, right? I live in a large city, and it's sort of large. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. It's like the largest small town you'll ever be in. And our infrastructure sucks, sort of. So when you talk about infrastructure that lasts for generations, right? As someone that works in the industry, what standards would you apply to contracts for, infrastructure that lasts? Because if you look at our bridges, right, around the country, most of our bridges are set to fail. Sorry, I'm not going to doomsday it, but as someone that works in the construction industry, I get nervous going over some of the bridges around the country that we have not upkept, right, since the New Deal. We invested so much money into infrastructure, and then we were just walked away from it. So we do have to do infrastructure, especially in rural areas, because one of the things I noticed on your platform that we agree to is Wi-Fi, right? Free public Wi-Fi everywhere. A lot of us have lived all over the world. I have, and Rory lived in Korea as well. They have free public Wi-Fi all over that country. And I understand the logistics of Korea being the size of New Jersey. I get it. But we should, especially for rural America, because when you're talking about lack of healthcare, which we're going to get into, and hospitals closing and mental health crisis in rural America, the first thing we need is Wi-Fi. And the infrastructure for Wi-Fi. So do you like I saw that was on your platform. Do you have like a idea for how you're going to get it done?
So I do have an idea on how we're going to get it done. The Rural Electrification Act was one of the most popular acts in America. It was one of the fastest ways to electrify even our rural communities. And if you copy some of the pieces of that make sense and apply it to Wi-Fi or apply it to water or apply it to pretty much anything, it's a pretty good piece of legislation. So what I did in the legislative piece that you saw on my website is I copied that but made it more modern to make sense for Wi-Fi. Now, do I think that is the number one? Do we have to do that one before we do water? I don't know. I struggle with water access every day, but I also struggle with communication access every day too. So in order for me to talk to you today, I have to have electricity, I have to have Wi-Fi, and I have to hope that the signal is okay for both of those to work to talk to you today. There are days where we lose electricity because the wind blew too hard and we just don't have electricity that day, which means that we don't have access to Wi-Fi, which means I don't have access to a telephone, which means because cell phone signal doesn't work here. Just in case anybody's wondering why my phone doesn't work if I don't have electricity, it's because cell phone service doesn't exist here. We do everything over Wi-Fi calling, so that makes Wi-Fi an essential utility, especially in rural America, especially in the mountains of rural America. So because I live in the Appalachian Mountains, that blocks a lot of the signal. As we get satellite internet, maybe that might improve, but we still have those valleys and smaller areas where it doesn't really reach the same way that it does in a bigger city. In bigger cities, you can connect to Wi-Fi. I actually know in Asheville, North Carolina, it's a really cool city in North Carolina. In Asheville, they have city Wi-Fi in certain parts of the city, so you can just access the Wi-Fi. You just have to sign in. And that's the coolest thing ever when you live in a place like this where you may not be able to get into the Wi-Fi that you paid for that day. And they already overcharge for rural America for your utilities. I didn't always live in rural America. I actually lived in the South for a while. My daughter was born in Tennessee near Gatlinburg. So I lived in cities, in pockets of cities. The last big city I lived in was Atlanta. And then I said, ooh, I don't like it here. And I sold everything and I moved to rural Pennsylvania. So, you take the pieces of the city that make sense and bring them and share them. And then everything else, maybe we build up our actual communities, our smaller communities. But yeah, so we have a rural electrification. I used it as a pattern to create a Wi-Fi bill in order to Wi-Fi the rest of rural America. It shouldn't take too long to actually implement, and it shouldn't cost too awful much. It's just really getting it out there to do it. Now, I know with my personal Wi-Fi, my neighbor, so the way that they ran the lines for the Wi-Fi, I got the good account. I actually had to pay $10,000 to have them run a piece of line so I could get internet to my house. My neighbor who is next door, he's less than a mile away, and he does not have the same access to internet. He has to go with a company called Frontier. They're even higher than what I pay. I pay over $80 a month just to have internet. That's not including my $800 a month electric bill. And not even joking, it was $800 this month. I cried. And, that's what we're looking at in rural America. And then on top of that, you have to think about how our electrification also runs our water. So part of what got me into running for office was my well pump broke, right? And we don't just sit around and just cry. My well pump broke. It was a time where my career, I was on top of my career, but like I was 8th in the country at one of the largest investigative firms in the country, but we ran out of work, which often happens when you go through casework faster than they intend you to. So I was out of work. My well pump died. I called the first company that I usually used and I said, hey, how about you come and fix my well? And they said, hey, we retired because we're old and we are tired. And I said, that's cool. I don't know what to do to fix my well. And they said, well, maybe call this company or this company. I called this company and this company. They both told me it would be $4,000 for them to come look at the hole in the ground to tell me what was wrong with it, not to fix it, just to come look at it. And I said, I can't afford that. So I then hung up the phone and I looked at my daughter who's 17, and she was younger than that at that point, but I looked at her and I said, hey, guess we're learning how to fix a well pump tomorrow. And that tomorrow took 3 months. It took 3 months for me to figure it out. It's combining plumbing and electrical and figuring out how to hit adapter, which is not a real tool. You have to build that yourself. Nobody told me. There's no instruction manual online for it, but I built it. And with the help of friends across the country, my brother's also in construction, so I called him too. And I built that thing. We hand pulled the well. It was 61 foot of line. We had to pull it. It was gross. We were nasty afterwards. In the middle of all of this process, we were going back and forth to the free well. And I met with hundreds of Pennsylvanian families in the course of 3 months that did not have running water or clean water in their home. They were going to the free well, getting water in buckets to take home, to do showers, to cook, to do basic necessities. And it made me angry. And I called my congressman, and his receptionist answered the first 100 times and listened as I explained, like, hey, we need a way to make sure that these people don't have to go back and forth to the free well. And the final time he said, Jen, if you don't like the job we're doing, maybe you should run for office. And I said, okay, thank you, sir. And I hung up the phone. So having basic necessities, having the infrastructure comes from a vital place for me, because it is what kickstarted me into running for office in the first place. Did I tell people probably 100 times over the course of my life that I would never, ever run for office? Yes. Was I comfortable in my job, both financially and you know what? I was okay. I was doing all right. I made more money some years than what I'll ever make in Congress. And that's okay, because I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this because Americans are left behind. And I happen to be one of them. And I had skill sets to overcome being left behind, but not everybody here has that. And that's why we need public servants that are public servants. And if I have to do it myself, I'm going to do it myself. And I appreciate you having me on the show, because you're helping me do that. You're part of the solution. And that's what we need across America, is solutions to the problem. And I might not know everything. I might not know every single component of the well, but I learned. And I'm going to learn every single component to this job too, because that's what we do. We have to overcome the things that we're given in life and make sure that the next guy doesn't have to suffer through the way we had to. So sorry, that talk on infrastructure, man, that's what gets us. So
yeah, no, I'm impressed. So I own a small plumbing company here in Jacksonville. It's me and my brother. I'm the licensed plumber. Mad props. Wells suck. My mom, I'm on city water because Jacksonville is a large city, but my mom has a well. She's not on city water. And
I'm in Jacksonville, so just fun fact, I've been there.
yeah, it's Jacksonville's a weird place. So because you have like the beach, and then you go all the way to the west and you're like into farmland, and then you like pass through a massive city on the way. It's a weird place. But yeah, massive props on it.
all over the coast. I was down there for a while. It was a few weeks. I was in Jacksonville doing some investigative work. Broke into some buildings. No big deal. So,
Hey, and like I've done that without investigative work. I was just a degenerate in a past life. And Rory lives in North Carolina, so I'm sure he's been to Asheville. I've been to Asheville.
Yes.
It's very, very interesting place. Um, so when we're talking about water, right? Like, thank you for informing me. I didn't really know that we were having that big of an issue. Everybody talks about Flint, right? Flint was such a huge water issue, and we spend a lot of money in USAID making sure other people around the world have clean water and clean water initiatives. And so, what role do you think that the federal government has in building infrastructure? I feel like doing a New Deal kind of act where we're expanding water purification, infrastructure of water piping. Because I mean, I live on the north side of the city. I'm like 4 miles from the Nassau County line, so I'm almost out of Jacksonville. Um, and they're doing like infrastructure up here right now with like water lines and stuff like that. Because I like drive, and I'm like, oh, that's a water line. Oh, they're putting in sewers. Um, what do you think the federal government's role is here to ensure not just rural America, but like even cities that don't have clean drinking water for its citizens?
I mean, so water, it's not just, we didn't just have an issue in Flint when we had an issue in Flint.
Yeah.
Flint got a lot of media attention, but we also had pockets of places in Mississippi, in Pennsylvania, in Kentucky. In all of these areas, we have had major issues with our basic infrastructure. And I feel like it is our role. So I'm already taking ownership of this position. We're manifesting because I have this job. So therefore, I have to figure out what my role is, what my job is. And my job, I feel like, is to take care of my people. Now, that sounds like overly burdenous, but it's not. It's making sure that we put the funding towards it, that we make sure that that funding actually goes towards it, so we have compliance, making sure that we write out the legislative bill, give the money, make sure there is some sort of reporting structure on how that money gets spent, and also making sure that we are mindful and not leaving these huge gaps in service. When your government's not serving its people, it's failing. And I don't fail well. So, if you can't tell from my water story. So, I feel like it's our job to do that. We make sure that we are putting as much towards that as we possibly can, and it's our job. That's the job I'm applying for, is to be responsible. One of the slogans that they were using, the volunteers were using, is fighting like a mother. Jen's fighting like a mother. Okay, listen, I am. Every single one of the areas that's in my district is one of my children, and each child needs something different. And we have to determine what that means. Like for Susquehanna County, we need water, we need electricity upgrades, we need upgrades to Wi-Fi. Schuylkill County, we have a high homelessness population. We have a need for to make sure that some of the assistance programs are in place, because there aren't a lot of jobs there, that we have support for our factory and for our labor union workers to make sure that they're covered. It's not mutually exclusive that we're giving these things to these specific areas. It would help all of the areas, but these are their major needs, and it's learning what those major needs are. Housing in our, say, in Lycoming, or in Luzerne, or in Lebanon. All of these areas have a high need for affordable housing. And how do we make that happen? Well, there's going to eventually have to be some sort of legislation to help push that through. Now, do I need to stand and point at every single mayor of every single city and be like, you have to put this in right now? No. But if I give them the tools, we should be able to trust our communities to utilize those tools and report back that it's done. And that's it. That it should work like that. And if it's not done, then we figure out why not, and figure out if there's new legislation that needs to be passed or new oversight that needs to be put through. Because we do have those positions within Congress, oversight and, the different review processes. All of these pieces and parts work together so you can be like a mother or be like a father or be like a public servant, because it's all the same thing. You're doing it without asking for thanks. You're doing it because it's what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about affordability for housing, I always tell whoever we have on this, because I work in the industry. The affordability of housing is a multifaceted issue that will have to be addressed like from different directions, right? Number one is labor. With ICE doing whatever the fuck they're doing currently, the labor force, right? I build high schools, but I have been in housing, in multifamily, and now I'm building like high schools. I just built a massive high school. Out of like over 1,000 employees, I think there was like 40 that were not of Hispanic, Latin American descent. So labor is number one. It's not just what ICE is doing. Another thing is you said we're around the same age. The problem is that people our age were told to go to college and then get a job, right? But there is a lot of money in construction, and nobody explained that to anybody my age. Me and my brother both grew up privileged, we went to private school our whole life. And I joined the military, and now I work in construction. And my brother was not made for the military and went into construction. So I think reinforcing trade schools, reinforcing that in high schools, and having kids learn in a different way, right? Like college isn't for everybody. Like I struggled through college because of my TBI and PTSD, but I got my degree. But it's not for everybody. Like my brother, no. No. He struggled to get his GED, like college ain't it.
So there's three of us. It's me, my older brother, and my younger brother. My older brother works in construction. He builds concrete panels. He's a union carpenter. He makes more money than God. I mean, it makes really good money. I, as an investigator, before jumping into investigative work and really finding with that, I worked in higher education for a while while I was also working in the police department. I did both at the same time. Also owned a small business. So I owned a landscaping company at that point to pay for college and I have a daughter. So I paid for things. But working in higher education, it really opens your eyes to the fact that there are some people that aren't meant for college, and that's okay. And sometimes they feel like failures if they don't make it through, but really that's just not your path. And my daughter, she has dyslexia and ADHD. She's 17, so she's in high school getting ready to graduate. Before she graduates, she will have a cosmetology degree, and she's already looking at opening her own business. She went to trade school while she also was in school because her school had that as an opportunity, because they had agreement with one of the local colleges. And I feel like that's more vital to our kids than pushing a 4-year degree my degrees, so I have degrees in political science, criminal justice. I minored in legal studies with a focus in constitutional law. The jobs I have had in my life, the number of jobs in my life that have required a college degree has been 0. No job I have ever had required me to have those degrees. I got those degrees for me, and I understand that now. But also, we grew up in the generation that it was pushed for us to go to college. We were failures if we didn't go. And it took a while for me to understand that it wasn't necessary. Now I'm an overachiever and I earned my degrees at the same time. So it's not like I went for one and then went for another one. I went for one and then accidentally had enough credit hours to get the other one at the same time, with the minor and all the other shebang. But it never was necessary for me to do the jobs that I have done. You know, working in banking. I started out at 18 in a bank. Then I went to higher education. They didn't require a college degree. I worked in admin. I wasn't a professor. I was admin. No college degree, even worked for the university. Then I went to work for the police department while I was at the university because there was an issue and we needed another officer. And so I took that job from that man. And so then I had those jobs opening up my business. I didn't need a degree for that. I did not need a degree to become a private investigator. I was actually headhunted for that and then was just really good at it. But there was no requirement for the degree. And now running for Congress, people think you need all of this fancy stuff to run for Congress. You kind of do, but you kind of don't. There's no statutory requirement for me to own a degree in order to run. I have degrees and I can prove that I have degrees, but that really is just showing the public that I can successfully complete something. Well, I successfully completed a lot of stuff to get here anyway. So that's just added fodder. But it doesn't increase my ability to learn. It doesn't increase my ability to be successful. And I think we're seeing now with the next generation, you know, my daughter's 17, they're not seeing it the same way that we saw it. And that's a good thing. They're not going to be straddled with high amounts of debt like our generation was, or, you know, the generation before us. Even I know my father, he went to college. He worked as a tree trimmer when he went to college to pay for his degree. And well, he did a couple of things while he was earning his degree. But one of the things was a tree trimmer. He didn't make a lot of money, but he was able to successfully complete college without having a lot of debt. Well, the people I graduated with in college, they successfully completed, but they had a lot of debt when they successfully completed. And that didn't always work out for them because there's no guarantee when you get those degrees that you're going to be able to use them. Do you know who does have a guarantee that they'll be able to use them? Electricians, carpenters, people who get the skills. They go to the trade schools, the beauty school kids. They always have something as a fallback. And at the very least, you know, my daughter, she's going to have a fallback. If she wants to go on later and get another degree, she has a degree that will help her have a job in order to pay for that next degree. But we need to make sure that we're setting our kids up for success and not for failure. And unfortunately, with our generation, some of us were set up for failure. We were told that these loans didn't count, that they would get paid off because of public service loan forgiveness or because of this, that, and the other. And some of those programs have been ripped away or they've been reduced, especially by this current administration with the public service loan forgiveness. They've reduced the criteria so you no longer qualify for those forgiveness programs. So that means when we took out those loans, we were lied to. And even as because I worked in federal aid, I probably shouldn't say this. I had a lot of death threats in my life, guys. I worked in all of the places that would get you a death threat. I worked at the police department. I worked in higher education in the financial aid department. Okay. In financial aid, I know when we did our loan our loan counseling, it wasn't the loan counseling that the kids get today. When I started in higher education, our loan counseling was this form. You handed them a form, they signed off on the form, you put it in the file. Did they read the form? Probably not. And that is how technical adults got straddled with a lot of debt. They were told they needed it, and then they were given a piece of paper and they just signed it blindly. And that's not okay. And I am also glad that the disabled forgiveness, yeah. But anyway, so, we need to make sure that moving forward, we make it better, but we also have to think about the people who are unhoused right now. A lot of our military vets are unhoused. They were promised housing whenever they signed up. They got housing for the duration of their term. And then once their term ended, when they retired, and I know your brothers and sisters out there, when they retired, some of them didn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. And we need to make sure that we have mental health services in place. And I know that's deviating into a realm we haven't talked about yet, but we need to make sure that we have mental health services in place, in addition to fulfilling that bottom tier of the Maslow's triangle. And
we talk about that. We talk
Yay!
about that all the time. The bottom two rungs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
I was like, Jen did the segue to it instead of me having to do it this time. I was going to say one thing, that it's funny that we got on this topic a little bit, because I was talking on Facebook recently with a friend of mine, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we think the last 2 years of high school should have trade school involved into it, and that way everyone has that blue collar fallback, and if you decide to go white collar and get a 4-year degree, then you can after you graduate.
I think it's important, right? Like, my dad was not super handy, but he did instill, like, as a woman, like, I needed to be able to take care of myself. So, like, he taught me to change tire, change my oil, all of that. I mean, I'm obviously a lesbian, but I, like, now I can I can build houses with my own two hands, right? And I don't have to call the plumber. I had a leak. I live in a 2-story too, and I had a leak. I noticed in my kitchen, my drywall was wet. So I just cut open the drywall and then looked at the pipe and was like, oh man. And so then I fixed the leak and then went and bought drywall and patched the drywall, and now it's done. But those skills are dying. And what I mean by that is, in the 2008 crash, we're talking about institutional knowledge. A lot of institutional knowledge left construction in the 2008 crash. I came into construction in 2014 when I got out of the military. And I was brought up, like, I was framer first, like I framed houses and then worked my way up. And I was taught by 60-year-old men. So now you have this generation who's retiring, and then you have a few of our generation, not many Gen Xers, and then even fewer younger people. So when we talk about affordability, it's not going to just be everybody's worrying about housing. Fuck housing. It's going to be your plumber, your electrician, your whomever is going to be so expensive. And that's one issue. Another issue for affordable housing is material, right? Like, when I was getting my degree, I wrote a published paper on 3D printed houses. And the reason I chose that is because it's sustainable, it's cheap, and it will solve the housing crisis in this country. And we, compared to the rest of the world, are so far behind the technology. China has 3D printed a skyscraper. And in the Netherlands and Denmark, they have fully sustainable houses with water that cleans itself. It's fascinating. But when we're talking about material shortages,
Like
Yes.
we need to. I mean, I watched the videos with the printed houses
Yeah.
that they do. That sounds amazing. Now the headache would be getting it up the mountain for like the amount of concrete and stuff, because driving a concrete truck up here is hard. But yeah, and I grew up
mixed on site though. It could be mixed on site, and that's the cool thing. Here's the bigger problem, because nobody wants to talk about the real problem with affordability housing. Is most house builders, right? They're in it for profitability. And the houses that are being built today are pieces of shit. Take it from someone that built houses. But they cost so much money because of profitability. Now, 3D printed houses are not profitable because you can print a 3D house for like a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,400 square foot home. Like, I did all the math in my printed paper to prove my point. It was like $55,000 to print, and like maybe another $40,000 to finish top end. Like, and I went like nuts with it. You know what I'm saying? Like Italian marble style shit. You could still do like 225,000 for like top of the line house. And so it's more about corporate greed, right? And we talk about how to fix this country, right? Like left, right, blue, red, whatever, is realizing it's not really a left or right issue. It's like a top versus bottom issue at this point. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and we have no middle class. I make, like you said, you made decent money. Like, I make decent money. Like, I'm somewhat single. I'm going through a divorce, but I make very good money in construction, and I live in Florida, which is sort of expensive, but not like uber expensive. I look at people around me that make less money, and I'm like, how do you afford to live? Yeah, because I know what I make, and I'm like, I live by myself. Like, how do people with like my coworkers who have like 4 kids and a wife, and I'm like, how do you afford to live? But yeah, affordability is an issue, but I think a bigger issue that we haven't touched on is mental health. So I do, because I know we're running out of time. Mental health is so important to our group, right? Like, we have tracked veteran suicides this year at VA hospitals after changes in policy, and I think we're currently at like 14. So it is a crisis. Like, 22 veterans a day has been for over a decade, right? Like, I have now lost more friends to suicide than I ever did war, and that is a problem. And when we talk about mental health care, and I don't just want to talk about veterans, because rural America has the same problem as the VA, with not enough providers, not enough appointments, not enough places. And so at least the VA did something. We instituted community care, which I think, personal opinion, is shit. Like, yeah, you get to see whoever you want, but it's taking money out of the VA system, which is then denigrating the VA because the money's not there. But mental health, especially within the veteran community, the VA crisis line people have been fired. More people are being fired from the Veterans Health Administration, not the Benefits Administration, the Health Administration. And that is not admin. That is doctors. That is nurses. That is providers. That is people that we go to see in the PTSD clinic, the TBI clinic, mental health care. And we talk about mental health all the time. Like, sometimes we go on like really deep dives on mental health, because it's a crisis. It is a crisis within the veteran community. And I am tired of burying my friends because we were promised healthcare. And the VA motto is to care for those who bore the battle. And like they changed it back. It was like gender inclusive, but then people got weird. So like now it's the men who bore the battle. Whatever. Point being is, how do you think we can get for rural America, like general, whatever, whomever that needs mental health care? Because it's not just veterans, it's not just rural America, it's young men, it's young women, it's married couples. Like we just have a mental health care crisis in this country because we don't have enough providers and they're paid like shit. How do you think we can have more people enter the profession? A, and how do you think that we can do it quickly for communities such as veterans, police, construction, farmers? Those are the top 4 professions for suicide.
Well,
How do you think we can do that?
So this is a really faceted, it's a multifaceted response to this, because it's not just getting people in those jobs, it's keeping people in those jobs, right? Yeah. I have friends, and I also dated several therapists who have went into therapy. It's a very hard skill set, right? It's very draining. It is, every therapist has their own therapist. That's the joke inside the sect, right? Every therapist has their own therapist. What's the bottom therapist going to do? Well, usually they leave the profession because it becomes so overwhelming to be everyone's go-to and not have anybody to go to. So we need to make sure that our therapists are supported, that they have the tools that they need, that they're enticed to go into that practice, and that they're compensated fairly for that support. But at the same time, go into just a healthcare crisis in general. In rural America, we have limited access to healthcare, period. And I know in the VA, you were talking about how we were losing doctors and nurses because they're not considered valued. And just go back to the fact that, just several weeks ago, that nurses were told that they weren't professional degrees. Well, that's not telling them that they're very valued. During COVID, how many nurses got the crap into the stick on that? They were in there putting their life on the line every single day when there wasn't a cure for COVID, that there was a chance everybody thought that they were dying. Literally everyone thought they were going to work to die. And I was considered an essential employee during that time. And my friends that were nurses, or my friends that were therapists, or my friends that were in the medical profession, they were all considered essential, and they were having to go in and put themselves on the line. And some people made it through the battle and some people didn't. So how do we support everyone in that sect to make them realize their importance? Well, we stop treating our workers like crap. We have a government that actually says, hey, you are actually important. You are actually essential. Let's make sure that these degree programs are there that include supports for you. So, for example, with mental health care, I know a lot of our therapy students, they do have to take a class where they go through their own therapy. And they need to have a continual care and a lineup for that going through the program and beyond, to make sure that they don't get burnout. We need to make sure workers in our country have what they need, period. It doesn't matter if they're in the healthcare system or not. We need to make sure that our employees are treated with dignity, and that honestly, the employees at the bottom should probably be treated better than the CEOs. There's an old adage, when you go into a corporate office, that you treat the janitor like the CEO. No, we don't treat the janitor like the CEO. We treat the janitor better than the CEO, because he has to clean up the crap. Had to pause there. You heard that. But we're making sure that the people who are doing the work, that they're getting the pay that they deserve. There's there's a problem in our country right now where the top 1% are making so much more than the workers at the bottom. And that is not really it's increasing the percentage between the top and the bottom. Well, that's eroding your middle class. We don't have a middle class right now because they're either at the bottom barely scraping by, or they're at the top buying yachts and other crap they don't need. Well, we don't need the people that are buying the yachts and the crap they don't need. We need the people who are doing the work that will grow our middle class, so we actually have the things in this country that we need, including mental health care. And circling back to mental health care, making sure that we do put in legislative measures in order to fund some of these subsidies to get the ball rolling, to get it started here. And also, let's cut out the health insurance company middleman. The reason why we have people who serve in the military is because they're promised a lot of things that are somewhat socialist, right? Like you get medical, you get housing, you get an education.
We're well aware that we fight capitalist wars and live in a socialist system. We're aware.
It's craziness, but those are good things to have in your society for the people who need them, right? People need an education, people need healthcare, people need food, people need housing, people need these things. Why are we withholding that because you work at McDonald's or because you work in construction? You know,
because you have to sign your life away.
You have to sign your life away for it. But also,
not even get healthcare for it.
But also, you should have the healthcare that you signed up for. And you're not getting that right now because there's no continuity of care. Because across the nation, different VAs treat different symptomologies different. And that's not cool. That's not okay. That's not how we combat some of these things, especially with PTSD. You know, PTSD.
One of the things I was going to ask you is like with mental health care, we talked about it because I talk about openly, like I have PTSD, I'm a TBI, but like I go to therapy. But the problem with the VA is that you can only, they only use evidence-based therapies. And what I mean by that is cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, EMDR, prolonged exposure, and like these evidence-based therapies, right? And I have been through like everyone, and like now we're out of therapies, and so now I have to go outside of the VA system, which I hate doing. I literally waited 10 months for an appointment that I just had like on Friday. I was super excited. I don't like going outside of the VA system. But when you only offer this, but we're not going to do this, you have to go outside of the system to get this. And it was funny that you talk about different modalities at different VAs, because like my civilian friends who are normal, whatever normal is, they're not vets. They were like, you need to do talk therapy. Well, my VA doesn't offer talk therapy. It's not offered. But at like Tampa and at some other ones, it is offered. And so it's like, man, I'm not going to travel all the way to Tampa to do that. But yeah, rural healthcare for veterans, specifically rural VAs, are closing. And I know this because Jacksonville's huge. We have our own VA, but I don't like our VA. Really long story. I have to go to Lake City. And Lake City is a rural VA. And I was hospitalized earlier this year for kidney infection. And like, it was a ghost town. Like that hospital was like, we don't have a cardiologist. We don't have a pulmonologist. What is your blood type? And when they asked me my blood type, I got real nervous because I have a rare blood type. And they were like, yeah, we don't have your blood. And I was like, I mean, I'm not having surgery. Like, so, yeah, the healthcare and rural America, veteran or not, needs to be addressed. I know, Rory, I know we're almost out of time. Jen, I would love to set up another time to continue our conversation. I have had a lot of fun and I still have a lot of notes that I wanted to talk to you about.
We can do it time. Let's do it.
Yeah, we can get you on the books to continue. Because we do, starting in January, we're going to do it twice a week because we want to get as much time to as many people as we can, and talk to them. So we close out in a certain way. But before we close out, I want you to tell us how we can donate to you. Our group likes to throw money at candidates. How do we donate? Where is your next campaign plate like thing, so that we can put it in our state chats and national chats for 5051? And how can we support you?
So throughout January, I have a multitude of events, and my volunteer would kill me if I said the wrong one. But I post all of that on my Facebook, as I remember to, on TikTok. You know, we have all the social media. To donate to the campaign, there is a link tree, or not a link tree. It's also in my link tree. But I have a website, Jen Brothers for Congress. So JENNBROTHERS FOR Congress, CONGRESS.com. There are donation buttons everywhere. It goes straight to Act Blue. I want to make sure that we're all on the up and up. So all of the money that I receive goes through Act Blue, unless it's by check. And then we have a specialty account that it has to go through that way. But we're making sure that we're reporting all of that to the FEC as is required by law, even if it's 24 cents. If you send me 24 cents, one, I'll laugh, and two, it'll be on the FEC report. Congratulations. But all of the donations go through Act Blue. All of my events will be published on our social media, and that is in, you can find all of that through the link tree that's listed on the website. So the website really is your hub to everything.
All right, good. Yeah, I looked all over your website. So in the military,